Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to finally meet some of you. The names do seem familiar, and I'm glad to be here to talk a little bit about the AHRC today and answer some of your questions where I can. As Jonathan mentioned, my name is Rushil Ranchod. I am an investment manager in the skills team at the AHRC. I like to think of myself as being relatively new in the role, and every day is a new learning experience. A key part of my work at the AHRC is to manage our fellowship investments, and the Clore Leadership Fellowship is an important and very interesting part of that portfolio of work. So what I want to do today is briefly provide an overview of the council, focusing on who we are and what we do, the kinds of activities that we support. And in so doing, I hope to provide some sense of the background of our relationship with Clore, and our interest in the leadership program. Jonathan, can I just check if the slideshow is up and running? If we can skip through. And next slide. Yeah, there we go. The next one. Great. So just by way of a brief kind of organizational overview, the Arts and Humanities Research Council is one of 9 councils which make up UK Research and Innovation, a non-departmental public body sponsored by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. UKRI was launched in 2018, and it for the first time united the 9 research councils within the UK. The AHRC is the youngest of these councils. It was established as a research council in 2005 from its earlier incarnation as the Arts and Humanities Research Board. Do you want to skip to the next slide, please? It's a long mission statement. I don't expect you to, I don't expect you to read it all. But just I want to highlight some of the 3 key aspects of the AHRC's mission, which are captured in this statement. And that is that our mission is to fund outstanding original research across the range of the arts and humanities. It's to ensure that the UK's reputation for international excellence in the arts and humanities research is maintained. And it's also to maximize public benefit of that research by seeking to support greater cultural participation, by addressing contemporary social challenges and creating economic value. We are currently finalizing our new delivery plan, but the diagram on the right of the slide identifies the continued priorities of the council. And in light of this mission, we aim to sustain a rich and diverse creative research ecosystem by being the largest provider of research funding, advanced skills training, and career development across the arts and humanities in the UK. Connection and collaboration are important aspects of our work, and we are committed to local and international engagement and connectivity, and to promoting and embodying the values of equality, diversity, and inclusion. Next slide, please. So to enable our goals of supporting world-class research and ensuring the UK's reputation for excellence in the arts and humanities, there are 4 key objectives that guide the AHRC's research funding, which I think are important for considering the kind of research that you'll be doing as part of the fellowship. The first of these objectives is essentially around discovery, which is a key part of our funding approach, and we work very closely with independent research organizations to extend training, particularly at the doctoral and postdoctoral level, while also strengthening outstanding talent in the creative and performing arts research sectors. Our council is committed to supporting research which seeks to understand and address today's most vexed challenges. This research is of high public value and impact, and is shown by our funded work, for example, on modern slavery and the ethics of artificial intelligence. The AHRC is also very keen to forge stronger connections between policy and evidence, and we are working very closely with a range of government departments, while also endeavoring to increase our stakeholder and public engagement activities. Thirdly, the third objective at least, is that we work very closely with higher education institutions and independent research organizations to build on initiatives such as our flagship program called the Call Towards a National Collection. And we are committed to providing the infrastructures for digital preservation and heritage science so that our national collections are accessible to all. Finally, in terms of the creative economy, the AHRC is, or rather the creative economy is now very much rooted within the AHRC's scope of activities. We are looking to build on the success of initiatives such as the Creative Industries Clusters Program to catalyze future innovation and to continue AHRC's transformation into a central funder of creative and practice research. Next slide, please. In terms of our subject areas or remit, the AHRC has a wide remit comprising the largest number of subject areas and research active professionals of all UK RI councils. Remit is a key factor in determining whether we support projects or not. So I would urge you as a hot tip to make sure that the research that you propose fits very clearly within one of these subject areas. The list that you see on your screen provides an indication of kind of the top level classifications, each of these is parent to more sub classifications, and this can and further information on this can be found on the website on the AHRC website, which is linked on the slide below. And I think you should have a copy of these slides for you to access this work. Our remit is also adaptive. So we have grown to include AI and digital humanities, environmental humanities, and we are keen supporters of interdisciplinary research as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we've been working, very closely with Clore Leadership Program since 2004. That's about 18 years now, and in that time, we've supported over 185 projects. For the AHRC, this program makes a very valuable contribution to our skills portfolio by extending our support for leadership development in the creative and cultural sectors, and also importantly, by growing research expertise in the arts and humanities by non-academic professionals. We hope to continue building on this partnership with Clore and to explore initiatives and activities to continue building leadership and strategic capability within the sector. Next slide, please. Finally, there's a lot of work that is going on. There's a lot of engagement activity, a lot of publicity activity and promotional activity taking place in the AHRC and across UKRI. I would urge you to visit our website and our social media accounts to keep abreast of this work, and to feel free to input into the work that's taking place. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. Sorry, it took me a while to unmute there. Really helpful to have the overview. Appreciate that. So we're going to carry on with the presentation. It will be myself and Shelley, and we won't take too long, and we'll take questions afterwards. But if questions come to you whilst we're going through this, please do feel free to chuck them into the chat. So, key information about what we're doing this year. We're going to fund up to 8 projects for AHRC grants. The money aspect of this is the same as we've done previously. So for anybody who hasn't previously done a grant, we have a £7,500 award to the individual, and that covers a few things which we can go through, and then £2,500 which goes to the HE institution. So there's 10k in total is the award, up to. It doesn't have to be the full 10k. The timeline is probably the most important thing here. We, as you know, are open for applications now. We are going to try and make decisions in July, which means that the period where you can start research is August. We are very mindful and conscious that lots of academics aren't working in August. So if there are any issues with that timeline as it appears, please do flag them early doors. It's helpful to us to get a sense of what you want to do when you're applying and the implications of it from a timeline perspective. What we're hoping for is effectively that the research that anybody undertakes happens in the autumn, effectively, and that writing up can happen in early 2023. We've timed it that way purposefully to make, hopefully for most people, the write-up falling in a period where you potentially are doing less art. Now, that's not true for everybody, totally get that, but we're trying to find the timing that works best for most people. Again, if doing it in that timeline is problematic, please do raise it now. We don't want to have projects which go beyond the timing we're talking about in terms of reports for the end of January. But we are open to having a conversation if there's some really interesting research that's going to happen that might need a little bit more space. I say that very, very reluctantly, because what I don't want to have is 8 AHRC projects that all come to me and say, actually, can we have until April next year? Because we won't say yes to that. What we might say is there's a bit of wiggle of a week or so if that makes a big difference. We can consider joint applications if that's something people are interested in. So please do shout and tell us early doors again if that's something you want to do. Here's the big thing. The way we've previously run the AHRC Awards is to offer it to the current cohort of fellows and the previous 2 years. Now, our timings for the fellowship program have changed. So we are actually, Hilary and Kate are currently in interviews for the next cohort of fellowship, literally as we speak. So they are not beginning until the autumn. So they won't have this as an option for them. The timing doesn't work. Partly for that reason, and partly because over the last couple of years during COVID, we've actually not had as many applications as we would have liked to have had. We made the decision this year to open it to more of you. And it's so nice today to have, I think there's 14 cohorts of fellows represented today, which is amazing. I'm not sure there's ever quite been a room or a Zoom room that's quite had that bigger breadth, 14 out of 17. So it's really nice to see a lot of you here, particularly those who are earlier fellows. I'm not going to say older, just earlier. But that's also the big change in terms of what research could and should look like, because clearly when we're talking to recent cohorts, we're saying what's of interest to you, what in your practice currently is something you are interested to go and research and to do a deeper dive into. That is still true. But for previous AHRC awardees from cohorts before Clore 15, well, Clore 1 to 15, what we have said is that we would like to see research proposals which link in some way to what you've previously done. Now, we've had a few questions ahead of this, which are really rightly good questions, which say, hang on a second, the research I did in 2008, it's a bit impossible to link it directly to what I'm doing now. My practice has changed massively. And I think the generic answer to that is that's absolutely fine. What we are most interested in is the development journey that you as leaders have undergone. And is there a way of demonstrating that through some of this research? What's the change story that you are embodying as a leader from when you did your fellowship to now? And I think there's a really interesting research point here that is a longitudinal vision, whereas historically our AHRC awards have been quite time focused and less longitudinal. So that's perhaps the best steer we can give in terms of what does it mean to say we want it to link to previous. I think in truth we are quite open to those links being relatively tenuous, but there being a link. It doesn't have to be the same body of research. And in fact, as Rachel will say, what AHRC don't want to see is simply replication of previous research and updating the results. That's not what we're after here. One other thing just to note with this is that at the same time, we are using some money from our partnership with AHRC to create a better compendium of previous research as well. So actually this also speaks to the fact that in hopefully about 6 months' time, there will be a part of our website which is much more useful for both fellows and other Clore Leadership alumni to go, all right, I'm interested in this area, what research has already been undertaken. So this is part of a wider initiative to say, how can we better represent and demonstrate all the research that you as fellows are undertaking? I'm going to bash on. So we're expecting a written report. I think you're all probably aware of that. That is the end point of the research. It does need to focus on cultural leadership. So again, that can be relatively tenuous, but it can't be, I'm really interested in the Olympics and I want to talk about how the javelin flight might be adapted by global warming. So you need a supervisor, and that has to be from a UK-based higher education institution. We are happy to help with that, conscious that that's not always the easiest thing to do. So please ask if that's something you need support with. The final report is written research, and it's about a 3 to 6 month commitment. Moving on. Process and timeline. So, Shelley, is this where you're picking up, or am I carrying on with this bit? You're mute.
You might have clicked through criteria, but that you may have actually.
Thank you.
But you may have actually touched on that in the spiel.
Good point. It's worth just looking at this briefly. So these are the criteria by which the applications are measured. So demonstrable public benefit, quality, originality, and clarity. These are all sort of obvious things, I think. The track record. So how are you showing what your practice has been that relates to what you're researching? Evidence support, public benefit. Diversity of projects is not one that you as individual applicants could necessarily influence, but we will be trying to look across the 8 that we want to fund for a diversity of art forms, diversity of perspectives. That can be in many different ways. I think the point for us at Clore Leadership and for AHRC is to have a really interesting array of perspectives and opinions. Shelley, in some of her presentation, is going to take you through some of what was being done previously as an example. And we actually, this is a bit of an overhang, Shelley. We will prioritize new applicants to the extent that people who haven't, from the last 2 cohorts, that's Clore 16 and 17s, we do want to give you opportunity to apply. We are doing this a bit differently this year, and I can imagine, we haven't specified, but I can imagine that we will offer probably around half of the 8 to fellows from Clore 1 to 15 in the attempt to try and get some research that is longitudinal. That will very much depend on who applies and what we get. Right, Shelley, I think it's over to you now.
Hello. Sorry, next slide. Right, process and timeline. So we had the information that went out previously said the deadline was going to be the 3rd of June. We've now realised with the Jubilee weekend, that's probably a bit mad. So we've actually extended it to Monday, the 6th of June. So the deadline is for 9 AM on Monday, the 6th. When we receive your proposals, we'll get together. So Jonathan and I will meet with Rochelle and maybe one of his colleagues at AHRC to discuss all the proposals, and then we'll come to some kind of decision by the 30th of June. Then we'll let applicants know that they're successful by around the 15th of July, and feedback will be offered to those that are unsuccessful. At this stage, usually we send out agreement letters to yourselves and to your supervisors, just to make sure things are kind of set in stone and we know what's what. And hopefully research projects can start in August. You know, as Jonathan said, this is kind of over the summer holidays, so you may not have access to a supervisor, but that's something that you can, you know, speak to your supervisor about early, just in case there's anything that you can start in that time. And submission of the final research findings, as Jonathan said, is by 31st January. But there is some wiggle room, you know, if you let us know when we can have a think about that. The next slide. So your applications, what you need to send us is, it can be in any kind of, we don't have a template, there's nothing kind of formal that you need to do, but what we do need to see is a provisional title of your research, the reason for undertaking the research and your context, your proposed methodology, a timetable for undertaking the research and writing a report, a dissemination plan, so who you might disseminate to and how, and the anticipated public benefit. a copy of your CV, and a detail of your budget. So you get 7.5k, but that could include some amount of bursary for yourself, and then cover research costs. It could be accommodation, travel, things like that, and dissemination costs as well. So really think about that and be realistic. You know, if you are saying that you're going to Scotland and you haven't put it in your budget, and you're actually using some funding from somewhere else, let us know that, because we'll start to kind of see some holes in your budget. And then we need to see written confirmation from your supervisor. In the past, people have sent us kind of an email from your supervisor saying, yep, okay, I'll supervise you. It needs to be a bit more formal than that. If you could get them just to email you and say, I agree to supervise whoever looking at this kind of research over this period, that would be great. We don't want just kind of like, yeah, okay, kind of emails. That's not what we need. Next slide. So examples of previous projects, things like cultural leadership in rural Scotland, community participation in museum governance, moving from recruiting diversely to sustainable working environments, neuroscience and change making, and feminist leadership approaches. So as you see, we have quite a diverse and rich research in the past. So try to think kind of outside the box as well. Next slide, please. Your HEI supervisor needs to be a named individual from a UK higher education. They need to support and guide your research plan and methodology, and it's good if you met regularly. As part of your kind of relationship, you should be able to have access to research resources at the university, like the library and IT, and they will they'll supervise your final research paper. And the supervisors themselves, we expect them to provide a short supervisor's report. And the 2.5k doesn't actually go to them, doesn't go to the supervisor, it goes to their institute. So make them aware of that as well. And next slide, please. Top tips. Ensure your proposal is really clear and the benefit rationale, context and plan. Check, as Rochelle said, that your subject is eligible. And if you've got any queries at all, just give us a bell, and we'll speak. We'll be in touch with Rochelle as well, just in case. One thing: confirm your supervisor early. I know that there's not much time before this kind of summer starts, and they need to factor that into their timelines and their working schedule. So really try and get hold of a supervisor early, and check your budget and check for eligible costs. When you're looking at your research costs, just if there's anything that you think, if there's anything you think might be dodgy, just let us know and give us a bell and see if it's something that we can actually put in the budget, and have a clear dissemination plan. Next slide. Finally, the deadline is now Monday the 6th of June. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Shelley. On that last point about dissemination, I will emphasize that is quite important. We are trying to do more on our side in terms of Clore Leadership's role in disseminating research. We do want you guys to also think carefully about how and where stuff gets shared. It's really important, and actually having just spent the last 2 or 3 months talking about our application to Arts Council and all of this stuff, and we talk a lot about the wider impact and influence of our fellows particularly, and so it's really current in my head at the moment, and it's always really helpful to see really tangible examples of where you as people who've gone through the fellowship and really benefited from such an intensive and in-depth experience can then influence the wider sector. So I will give a lot of emphasis from my side to that, because I think it is hugely important. Right, that's our presentation over. Would you believe, bang on 11:30, how about that? It's not often that happens. So we've got another half an hour if we need it, to take any questions people have. It's also fine to mull over this and email questions to Shelley or myself afterwards, that's fine. But is there anything burning? Is there anything that anybody's particularly coming up with? Oh, sorry, can we unshare the screen? That's a really good question. No, don't know how. Give me a second. Sorry, there we go. Screen unshared. Welcome back. So Amanda's left and had to go, so she's got something coming in. So I'm gonna try and look. We've got Selena. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Jonathan, Shelley, and Michelle. My question is for the Higher Education Institute supervisor in the UK-based, and does it do they need to be like a professor? What kind of level are you talking about in terms of supervisorship?
Good question. Rochelle, can I put that one to you?
We haven't really stipulated a level at which they should be. So from our experience, we've had people, as lecturers all the way up to professorial level. So as long as they are, a recognized academic within an institution, legitimate. That we're not.
Yeah, because I potentially might be researching something quite new, and the areas of expertise. I mean, their expertise in their areas. They might not have a PhD. I don't know yet. But they have areas of expertise that they can help contribute to the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think the overarching thing should be that they are recognized by the institution to have supervisory capacity. So they should be academic staff members rather than PhD students, for example.
And the institute doesn't need to be a university, although it could be associated with a university, for example.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean. What do you have in mind?
I'm implying, for example, there are institutes such as Corporate Governance Institute. Is it considered a higher education institute or?
It would have to be on an approved list of providers. So if you could perhaps send that through, and we can double check that with our records. It would be. I mean, let's just do it that way so that we can,
All right.
There isn't any problem down the line.
Sure, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Selena. Rochelle, is that approved list something that is publicly accessible, or is that something we have to check individually?
The list of independent research organizations would be. The actual institutions, to the best of my knowledge, aren't. But I can look into that.
So if in doubt, please ask, and we will check.
Okay.
Great.
I've had a question from Julia, and it's she's just asking what the word count for the report is. I mean, as far as I'm aware, there's no fixed kind of length of the research paper, but we expect it to be able to publish it, so the output, so it needs to be publishable. And we also asked for a summary of about 1,000 words, so if that gives you kind of a bit of a thing.
Having looked through quite a few previous ones, they do vary in length, but I'd say the shortest I came across was about 10 to 12 pages maybe. But that seemed quite short. But yeah, it is an open feast, and actually very much depending on what your research is and how much detail you feel is needed. One thing I would maybe suggest is that from a support for the wider sector and what's helpful, it can be really useful to chuck stuff that's sort of data heavy into an appendix as one thing to just note. That's quite a useful approach in terms of legibility and also usefulness for other people to see what you're doing.
Thank you.
Any more as we're going? Absolutely.
Well, I mean, if anybody has any, I mean, if any of our recent fellows have produced research and they think their experience of putting forward the proposal and doing the research would be of interest, do kind of shout out as well.
Hayley, can I lean on you a little bit since you have literally just submitted?
Yeah, sorry, say again, what's useful?
Maybe just your experience of your submission, but also the process that you've gone through over the last, it's about a year, isn't it?
Yeah, I think my major learning is be really clear on your scope. That's definitely where I've come unstuck. So don't be overly ambitious about what you can reasonably achieve in that time frame, because it's not an awfully long stretch of time, especially when you're working with a with an academic, and if, like, I guess most of us, you don't have a, it's not second nature of you to be doing research like this, and to be really clear about what you are trying to achieve, and to think about how you're going to do it. So I was fortunate enough to have done a piece of research in this last round, which I'm still straggling the last bits submitting, and Clore been very understanding about that. The clearer you can be about what you want to do and how you want to do it, the better. But also leaving space for the inevitable changes that might come along. What else is useful to know? That's been the major learning for me, and really reckoning with, if all the different kind of methodologies and what underpins those things, and why you are choosing to do something in that way. And then I think the other thing that's important is, in my head, the stuff that I want to do and communicate is clear, but the clearer you can make your rationale and elucidate that for other people, the easier I think it is to stay on topic with what you want to do with it. So, like, what am I doing and why am I doing this? And if you can explain that to somebody else and that makes sense, it helps to keep that like a tight nugget of what you're doing and why.
Yeah, thank you, Hayley. That is really helpful to hear, and like I say, you're probably the most recent, so useful.
Next week, advice.
So we have another raised hand. I'm sorry, I don't know your name because it's down as yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah, so Stephen Bennett, Clore Fellow from, what was it, Shelley Clore 16. So I think we're still doing it. We started in 2019, and actually I think that's kind of quite interesting context. So I did the research, and it was pretty intense. So I think Hayley, sort of just agreeing with your sentiment there, it's kind of pretty full on, and so just making sure that you do have that space to do it. And I think it worked well for us because obviously we're in the middle of the pandemic, so all of our typical kind of Clore leadership type stuff that we might have done, none of that could happen. So actually doing the research for me was really powerful and a really good sort of way to kind of progress and to take my thinking forward. The other thing that I would say is that I really focused on practice-based research, and that was something that I kind of worked up in the proposal, and my supervisor also sort of was quite up for. And my understanding, I think we've got Rishal from AHRC on. I'm not sure if anyone's spoken from AHRC because I only just joined, but my understanding is this is something that AHRC are really interested in, is practice-based research. And although it's actually it's still kind of like people are still figuring out what it means and what it actually looks like, and how to kind of weight that alongside other more traditional forms of research. But what I did is I did some research, and then I kind of made what I thought, because I'm an artist, and sort of did an exhibition which helped with some of the communication and engagement as well. But actually I sort of sought feedback on some of the things that I actually made to then feed back into the research, and that I thought was I really enjoyed that. That gave me a lot. It made it perhaps doubly or triply hard because as well as doing research, there was a making process, and I think it would have been difficult to do that in a time when there wasn't COVID. Or at least when I wasn't in a sort of lockdown, but that kind of gave me quite a lot. So I think that's something interesting to think about. People might be, I imagine we've got a lot of makers on the line, whether you're a theatre maker, whether you're a performer, whether you're someone who makes objects or artworks, and if that's what you do, then actually sort of manifesting your research could be something quite interesting.
Thank you, Stephen. Rochelle, do you want to come back on that at all, or is anything to say about practice-based research?
Other than what I said in the presentation, and I think it's important and it'd be good to, you know, be happy to fund that kind of work and to support that kind of work. So more than happy to have you know, practice-based research as part of the mix. I may also add that, you know, in terms of this idea of, you know, extending one's research beyond the initial project, if there is an attempt to do this kind of, you know, iterative work, that, you know, identify new methodologies, identify new kinds of publications or formats for publications, and I think that is an important value add that can support the proposal. Thanks, Rochelle.
Nice comment from Haley in the chat there. Yes, I haven't read your research, Stephen, but I am now going to go and do so. Phil.
Thanks. Hi. My question is, I don't know if it's a question or a statement or something is still happening. I think it comes on from what Stephen was saying. My research will be dance-based. It's also about access. And so the question is about the dissemination and how that culminates, because in both these contexts of dance and access, words might not be the most appropriate form. And so when it comes to that final submission, what's the question I'm asking around that? Is there any scope to have a sort of performative submission with maybe a contextualizing document?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer in brief is yes. We definitely need written submission. That's part of the deal here, because it is a higher education research grant. But we have got other examples of recent fellows who have done formative types of, or are looking at, I should say, actually, the formative types of dissemination. So I'm trying to remember their name and I can't, but somebody who's working with a visual artist to do some visual representation of some of the research findings. So I think there probably is scope. My limited knowledge of this would be to give a little bit of caution to you in terms of the amount of budget you have available for that sort of thing, because if you're paying people to do performance type work as part of your dissemination, then there's not a huge amount of budget for that.
Yeah, so I have a kind of second question on that. I'm already doing a project, which is Arts Council funding. Does this research have to exist only within this 7,500 allocation, or can it kind of coexist with something that's already in process? It will start in August as well, so the timing would be ideal.
Certainly from Clore Leadership's perspective, that's not a problem. I'm going to double check that with Rochelle, who may need to double check himself.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to take that away and just double check the rules around that.
Cool. So Phil, we will take that as a question and come back to you directly. And then when we post this video for other fellows or for you to rewatch, we will, I hope, have a response by then and be able to put that up. Thank you, Phil. Good questions. And just before I go to you, Charlotte, there's a link, Stephen. Thank you for the link in the chat to your research. So do go and take a look at that. Anybody else here? Charlotte.
Yeah, hi everyone. Just a really practical question, really, to people that have just been doing the research, just around time and time commitment, and what is kind of expected in terms of time commitment. As in, were you working full-time or part-time? Were you freelance? How's that worked? I'm kind of just considering like not signing up to doing something that's going to be too much, which is sometimes my way. So just wondering what everybody else's experience has been.
Anyone want to come back on that?
I combined mine with having a baby, which in retrospect was a poor choice. Well, no.
Oh no, I mean, but I'm just about to have a baby. That's terrible. But that's good. That's good. That's good feedback for me.
Well, I was working as well.
Okay.
So if you're on mat leave,
yeah.
I think it's like one of these things where in life, sometimes you have to, well, I was reflecting myself here, if I don't create a space to do something, I won't do it. And by creating that space, it means some of the other things get a bit sandwiched in the side. But there's a bit of a kind of thing about, you know, if you sort of just carry on, the thing won't get done. Whereas if you sort of force yourself to do it, then it will. And I think, you know, if looking back, I don't regret doing what I did, because if I hadn't done it, it would never have got done. But it was a bit hairy at times. But then I was combining work with, so I was working part-time, 80% with a baby and with the research. So maybe that combination was the thing that was particularly tricky.
Great, thank you. That's really useful.
Had a different experience because at the time my son, well, I did AHRC research in 2015 to 2016, and at the time my son was in boarding school and my husband was in Hong Kong. I was in the UK. I had all the time that I did with the research, which gave me an opportunity to do it in a way that became very rich. And I definitely have overachieved it because I had the time, but that was a personal choice. You know, I decided to take a sabbatical during that period and focus on it. And as a result of that, I felt that I learned a lot and was able to enjoy the process because I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt that I was in a flow because I can afford the time. But if I do it again, would I, you know, for example, take a leave from work, because I do work part-time and I have my own business now. So it was a very good question that I was glad you raised it, because then I have the decision to make about, you know, how to prioritize a piece of research like this, which is very important, potentially have huge impact, and it only lasts for six months. Yeah. So I think it was a good question I'll take away and to think about, you know, how to make the priority happen.
Thanks, Selena. Also really enjoying whatever the music was in the background. It's pretty cool. It is a good question, and actually what it makes me think is that it's worth saying that we don't know if and how we will open up AHRC grants in future years. So whilst we are opening it up to more cohorts this year, that was partly a function of the change in timing that I explained earlier about when fellowships land. But actually, in fact, over the next few months, we're going to be talking to AHRC about what the future relationship looks like. So in fact, what we go through with this process of having more cohorts of fellows eligible to apply will inform what we do in the future, but I can't guarantee that it will be open again in this way. I'm sorry, that's sort of the counter to this, which is saying maybe take the opportunity while you've got it, because we don't know where it will be. But I think it's worth being really open about that. We just don't know in future years what we'll be doing. Any more whilst we're here? We've got about 10 minutes of the session time left.
Sorry, may I ask one more question? I'm interested to do an interdisciplinary research, and I saw the list that Rochelle put up that has a yellow side and a blue side. Are there any correlation between the two colors, or no? Okay.
No,
thank you.
Sorry, I probably shouldn't have done that.
I should take something from the yellow list and then something from the blue list.
No. The colors
okay.
They don't have any meaning. I would urge you, however, just to ensure that you know the project you will propose does fit within the remit generally. Do have a look at the kind of sub classifications that I mentioned as well, to give you a sense of, especially if it is interdisciplinary, you know, what falls within the AHRC's disciplines and what may fall within another research council discipline. So just, you know, I would urge all of you to have a look at that information on the website. Thanks, Rochelle. And from Clore Leadership's perspective, interdisciplinary is very interesting, but do make sure it's definitely hitting some or more, one or more of those. We will share that presentation so you can have a look in more detail at those subject areas.
Thank you.
Right. May I just add, Jonathan, all the information is on the AHRC website as well. So, you know, please do feel free to visit that too. Great. Thank you. It feels like we've gone through the questions that there are. If you have more after this, as I say, please do email. We want people to be communicative through this process. It's not you get the chance to submit and that's the only communication. Your fellows, we know you,
we want to talk to you, particularly Shelley, because it's a joy to have Shelley back, and I know that she's really keen to reconnect with you all. But same for me as well. So please talk to us if you've got thoughts and ideas. Very happy to have conversations, and we really want to see some really interesting submissions and projects. Yay, Shelley, indeed. I think therefore we will close it here. Thank you everybody for coming this morning. It's always really nice being in a room of fellows, and particularly one that's sort of got lots of different cohorts, because you bring a special energy to these things. So thanks for giving us your time today. Like I say, any questions? Just before we finish, Shelley or Rochelle, anything else from either of you?
No, I just had a final thought. I mean, it's in the criteria in the briefing that you've got, the guidance. I mean, you know, people are talking about if they had actual time to do the research. There is a bursary, so as part of your budget, you can have up to £5,000 for kind of living costs. So if you were to take time off work to start the research, then that is in there. So just bear that in mind as well. But no, it's been lovely to see. There's so many names and faces. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Rochelle, anything before we
And nothing really from my side. Just good luck with the applications, and do get them in. And it's been a pleasure to put names to faces and meet some of you.
Thank you. Thanks everybody. Really nice to see you all. Have a good rest of your day, whether it's NPO or not. Cheers.